this week, we've seen a debate between institutional disruptors and the judiciary. While the Supreme Court tells Prashant Bhushan to apologize by Monday, the larger debate becomes a campaign to systematically besmirch the judiciary. On the legal, we speak to former Additional Solicitor General Mr. Atmaram Nadkarni to see his views on how the Supreme Court puts its house back in order.
Leading lobby member Prashant Bhushan, who has been pulled up by the Supreme Court for his contemptuous tweets against judges and the judiciary. Absolutely brazen when the hearing of his sentencing began.
Brazen and defiant, Prashant Bhushan does not submit an apology in the Supreme Court today. He's been given time till Monday to submit an unconditional apology. He's brazen and continues to say that his tweets are bona fide and did not destabilize democracy. In a twist, he says the Supreme Court bench hearing the matter should not hear the matter anymore. The Supreme Court says this would be them now committing an act of impropriety.
While he's been given 2 days by the highest court of the country to reconsider and tender an apology, in all likelihood, this PIL expert, who in the past has called for contempt proceedings, will attempt a fake show of bravado and defiance.
Chance till the 24th of August to consult his lawyers and file an unconditional apology before the top court. In case Prashant Bhushan now apologizes before the Supreme Court before the 24th of August, then there will be a hearing that will be conducted on the 25th, which is when the three-judge bench headed by Justice Arun Mishra is going to decide what the future course of this case is going to be.
Meanwhile, India has seen through their designs. In an open letter, lawyers and former judges have written to the Chief Justice of India seeking action against institutional disruptors who attack judges and vilify the judiciary when judgments don't meet their political ends. Bhushan, who used this picture of the CJI on a Harley Davidson to slander him, has also been called out by prominent citizens of the country for denigrating institutions with a political agenda. They tried engineering a chaos when judges were at war. They failed. The Rafale stunt flopped miserably. The migrant card politics with a clear ulterior motive was binned. And the attempt to glamorize urban Naxals has no takers. Is it time for the hypocritical lobby, which has for long attacked our institutions, to get the message and back off?
On the show today, we have a very special guest. He's been former Additional Solicitor General of India. He's been the Advocate General of Goa for 12 years, the youngest one at that, someone who's known across the legal board to be very, very thorough with his facts. I welcome today Mr. Nadkarni on our show. Mr. Nadkarni, thank you for being with Republic TV today. The first question, sir, over the last 2 weeks, I would say over the last few years, we've seen this heavy, torrid debate going on in the judicial circles revolving a certain lobby. Some people call them institutional disruptors. Just this week, we've seen how Prashant Bhushan and others among his lawyers have had this conversation in the Supreme Court where we've seen for 2 hours back and forth go on. The shorter question I begin with, how do you think this case will pan out? How should it pan out? And the larger picture here, 700 lawyers pass a full court resolution. There are people, 100 eminent citizens who come forward and condemn the actions of this lobby, but yet a certain segment continues to say he is not going to apologize, there is no need. What do you think is at stake here?
Firstly, we must remember that if there is one institution in this country in which people have tremendous faith and they turn to as a last resort, is the Supreme Court of India. Be it during emergency, be it during any other political misuse of power or any other thing, or for the purpose of freedom of speech or liberty. One has always turned to the Supreme Court of India, and the Supreme Court of India has done a great job since country's independence in delivering justice. Now, an institution of this type has its own reputation, and the general perception of the reputation amongst the larger section of the population of the country is that here is a forum where you will get justice. Now, it is possible there could be a few aberrations here and there, but that does not mean that the whole institution should be maligned. Suppose tomorrow, in a basket, there are 100 mangoes or 30 mangoes. Assuming you have something to say about one mango, that doesn't mean that you should tarnish the entire 30 mangoes as bad. I mean, that's one way of looking at the matter. But today,
Therefore,
Supreme Court of India as an institution. Yeah, tell me. Sorry, you were saying.
Yes, and therefore, Mr. Nadkarni, the question that I beg to ask you, haven't we seen for the longest time, sir, and the only question I ask you, I remember the medical scam case that happened in 2017. There was also a PIL file that was being dismissed. At that time, there was also a comment made that there is a forum shopping that's happening here. There is clearly a contempt case that could have been made out in 2017, but that they didn't go forward with it. Today, when this is happening, this is not only about 2 tweets. The bigger picture that we continue asking on Republic TV and other forums is only one thing. This is about causing disrepute to the judiciary on a national and an international forum.
Yeah. Nobody can be allowed to hold the Supreme Court to ransom. You have filed a PIL, you have brought a cause to the attention of the court. It is thereafter for the court to take a call on it. A petition may be allowed, petition may be dismissed. What happened in the Rafale scam? The Rafale scam, initially the court took it up very seriously, went through it, went through the papers, directed government to produce all the files, went through the files, went through the papers, and then took a call and dismissed it. Now, just because a petition has been dismissed, that doesn't mean, that somebody has been managed and therefore the whole thing has been, it's only it'll be a complete mockery of justice if you allow anybody to tarnish the reputation. I mean, that should not be allowed, because just because you lose a matter in a court, that doesn't mean you should attribute something to judges immediately. In fact, on your program itself, I remember
and the larger picture
had something
yes.
about it. Please. Yeah, on your program, the number of messages which were being flashed, by all people across the country. I mean, please have a look at them. If you play it again, you yourself will know how many people, in fact, want that Supreme Court's dignity, prestige, and integrity must be preserved.
Mr. Nadkarni, therefore I ask you a question here. This is not the first time. Lots of people say this is becoming a lobby that's habitually offensive. But they've taken it upon themselves not to apologize. The way they speak in the Supreme Court. I've seen in the Ayodhya case how the lobby, or I remember on December 4th, 2017, how they threatened they will walk out. And this has almost become a practice. Every Chief Justice goes through this. So what they're trying in a sense to do is intimidate judges and trying to pressurize judges for their own political means.
Yeah. Now, once you have decided, to say something about an institution or the head of the institution, and if it borders on the contempt, because in our country we have a freedom of speech, but that freedom of speech is not, a complete unlimited freedom of speech that you can go on saying anything and you can go on write anything. That's not the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is protected up to a particular level. That's why the Supreme Court was talking about Lakshman Rekha. Now, if you cross that particular line, then obviously you have to be ready to face the punishment. And then it doesn't matter whether you get signature of 1,000 judges or 1 lakh judges saying that action should not be taken. If you have crossed the Lakshman Rekha, question is, if you have crossed the Lakshman Rekha, then be prepared to face. It's all right. I mean, I appreciate Mr. Bhushan's stand that he is not going to apologize. Must be, he believes in it. And I also take it and I appreciate what he said, that I said it and he did it in the interest of the institution. Possible. But in the interest of the institution, when you do it also, please do it in the properly acceptable, legally tenable form. It can't be, by abusing something. You can't abuse something and then say, I did it. Your intent is completely immaterial. In a matter of contempt, it's a matter of strict liability if you cross the thin line.
But Mr. Nadkarni, I would say and I would add here that it is the intent that is extremely important, because the intent becomes very malicious and mischievous. It's not the first time or the second time. We've seen earlier how he is someone, Mr. Bhushan, who's always asked for contempt of court, whether it's Justice Karnan or whether it's in other cases. It's not about waxing eloquent in 2 tweets, but it is about the intent of the tweets. If we read the judgment carefully, it says when you're trying to say and give out a picture of a judiciary in a certain way, what you're trying to do is ensure that the public thinks about us in a certain manner, which is causing grave injustice, and nothing can happen that will cause injustice to democracy. So the larger picture is what they're trying to do. And I say there's institutional disruptors and they're trying to do this, and I've seen this happen with the impeachment proceedings. I've seen this happen with certain cases that they've put earlier. I've seen this now happen with a tweet on the present Chief Justice. They're only trying to cast doubts and create a doubt within the public that something is amiss within the judiciary, and that must stop.
You are absolutely right. You know, in our country, we have a right to criticize a judgment. If a judgment is delivered, I may or may not agree with it. And I have every right to criticize the judgment. You can criticize the judgment, but obviously you can't criticize the judges who have delivered the judgment. You know, saying that they are like this and they are like that, etc. Because it's a judgment of the institution. You can say the judges are wrong on this legal point. The judges ought not to have delivered this judgment, or that you do not appreciate this judgment. There are various judgments of Supreme Court which have come under various criticisms, and none of them have been held up for contempt. Now the question is the way and the manner and the method in which you try to, bring about the whole thing. It sends a completely different message. Whether it be about a tweeter or be it about naming the chief justices, or whatever it is, it ultimately depends upon the manner in which you do it. That's the reason I said about intent, because Mr. Bhushan said his intent was in the interest of the institution. And that's where I joined issues that, yes, if it is in the interest of the institution, it could have been in a far much better way, because there are acceptable ways of presenting things.
Monday is the time he's been given to submit an apology. He's been brazen, he's been defiant. He says, I will not change my stand by Monday when it comes to an unconditional apology. The larger picture at the same time they want, and this is the twist that I find most surprising, most shocking. They still say the sentencing should not be heard by this bench. It should go to another bench. What is it that once again they're trying to say here about the judges who are hearing the matter? And the judges actually said, by saying this, you're telling us to commit an act of impropriety.
Firstly, the first point, that he does not want to apologize and he wants to stand by his tweet, is it's all right. One should appreciate his stand. Fine, that's okay, well taken. 2, telling the judges not to hear this matter after they have delivered a judgment, because judgment and sentencing is an integral part of the same order. It's only the law which came to be developed in the jurisprudence that after you have delivered your judgment of conviction, that you are required to hear a person on sentencing. That was the jurisprudence. That's why they have just deferred the sentencing part to hearing. And their lordships have indeed given him an opportunity that, all right, if you want, you now also tender an apology. In fact, if you ask me, this is never given before. This is never given to any contender, that now, after having convicted you, we give you a chance to apologize. Perhaps it's all right, judges are within their right to give such an opportunity to him. But at the same time, to tell the judges now that you don't hear the matter because X, Y, Z reasons, or send it before some other bench for sentencing,
yes,
I don't think that is the correct perception, because neither law nor the facts warrant such a kind of thing.
You're a very important, Mr. Nadkarni, a very esteemed member of the bar. You understand the law, you understand the nuances. You worked very closely as the Additional Solicitor General with within the Supreme Court's perimeters, in the Supreme Court, I would say. Do you think for the past 5 years, for the past 6 years, for the past decade, there has been a systematic campaign to try and besmirch the judiciary and the judges?
I've got mixed reaction to this. And yes is the answer, which would outweigh the other mixed reaction, other part of the mixed reaction. As I told you, we have freedom and we have every right to criticize the judgment. We have every right to criticize an approach or the ideology or the system followed in Supreme Court. But that does not mean that you should take it and stretch it to a level where you tarnish the reputation of the entire institution and paint it with one brush, saying that, the institution has failed itself, it has failed democracy, and all these larger jargons. These are not required. An institution in which majority of the people of this country, more than majority, if you take a census, you'll have almost 90-95% saying that, we look forward to Supreme Court in case of any resolution of any dispute between the government and the citizen. Because Supreme Court has the last word on it. It's the last arbiter of the dispute. And therefore, I agree with you that there is a kind of a systematic campaign, and perhaps it was, the judges at that time tolerated it, and therefore it has grown. So sometime someone should have taken and called it a full stop. Because if you allow a person to cross a Lakshman Rekha, and if you allow him to, lick your finger, he's going to eat your hand up. And that is what it has come to. Perhaps partly those people who tolerated all this nonsense should also have been, are also equally responsible for this.
People like you, sir, who've been in the Supreme Court, we've been watching the proceedings of the Supreme Court, in hushed corners in the Supreme Court, in secret conversations, everybody's talking about what's been happening. Forum shopping is something that people are talking about. We've seen how in 2017 in a medical college case this was spoken about, and how the Supreme Court had just stopped short of starting contempt proceedings. And yet again, we were very closely watching what had happened then. But yet again, if this step had not been taken, I think this lobby was going too far, because they were trying to intimidate the judiciary by saying we shall go to any lengths to ensure that we threaten or try and blackmail you. And I would go as far as using the word blackmail.
Yeah. Ma'am, there's a slight difference in this, in the sense, if you recall 2017, when this kind of forum shopping, etc. was being alleged and was happening, 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court next to Chief Justice came out openly and held a press conference. I hope you remember that. 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court came out.
Yes, absolutely, I remember that.
Justice Chelameshwar, Justice Gogoi, Justice Madan Lokur, and Justice Kurian Joseph. These 4 judges stood up and they actually protested. So if there is anything of the kind, out of this 30-35 judges in the Supreme Court, all judges are not going to take it lying down. The judges would have protested, even if the kind of anything was going on. But that does not mean, we should not allow the inner checks and balances of the institutional mechanism to be completely done away with, and we take the law in our hands and we start pronouncing others guilty. Of course, this is not, and it's been a systematic campaign, that make tweets, make casual comments. This is something unheard of. You may not agree with the Supreme Court judgment. You may criticize the Supreme Court judgment. You may criticize the approach of the judge in delivering that judgment. All this is permissible. But that does not mean that you tarnish the reputation of the institution, cast, doubts about integrity of the institution, and cross the Lakshman Rekha which is there. If you have crossed the Lakshman Rekha, then obviously the law is going to take. And if you ask me, law should have taken care of it long back. But doesn't matter, better late than never.
That's a very valid point. The law should have taken care of it a long time ago, because it's gone on for too long. We've been seeing horrified in the court how judges are sometimes spoken to by them, and how the judges have to have to, because they're maintaining the dignity of the court, continue with the proceedings. We've seen it in the Ayodhya case, we've seen it in the Rafale case, we've seen it in several other cases. Mr. Nadkarni, my last question here, do you also think at several times we've seen the timing of these disruptions is very critical? Do you think they have a backing of a certain political system that helps them, and it's almost like they work in tandem?
Yes, it is possible to say that, because, unfortunately for the political parties in this country, they've just been taking sides. It's not a principled distribution of things. Many countries, you will see, when it comes to country's institution or country's interest, we are all one. I mean, we'll support whoever it is and we will fight for the country. But unfortunately, in our country, what happens is, if government says A, the opposition will say B. If the opposition says A, the government will say something else. So that should not happen. In the interest of the country's institution, I wish and pray all these political parties come together and really build and take India to its loftier heights.
Absolutely. And the one thing we leave our viewers with, as this case is going to be decided on Monday, we're going to see what possibly happens, whether there will be contempt. But the larger point, Supreme Court hits back. It's time for the glory that the Supreme Court is to be ensured by everyone. Whether disruptions or not, the dignity of the Supreme Court should always be there. Thank you, Mr. Nadkarni, for being a part of the Legal this week. See you next week.
Thank you so much.